Hello, everybody. It's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're going to take a look at the final game of the Sid Meier's Civil War collection. We have streamed Sid Meier's Gettysburg, Sid Meier's Antietam, and now we are on to the final battle that is represented in one of the greatest war game setups in all time. That battle is Sid Meier's South Mountain. Now, unlike Antietam and Gettysburg, South Mountain was not released as a purchasable game. Rather, it was a piece of the Antietam game, although it was released as a standalone. So it was essentially, well, not a standalone, but essentially it was an add-on that you could download with the final patch of the game that added the battles of Turner's Gap and Crampton's Gap, which make up the battle for South Mountain. The Battle of South Mountain was an engagement that took place just a few days before the Battle of Antietam. General McClellan had intercepted, or captured, I guess, via complete luck, Robert E. Lee's invasion plans of Maryland during the 1862 Maryland campaign. Lee's orders were wrapped up in an old cigar, I guess, and essentially they were discovered, or not with an old cigar, but with a new cigar, and they were discovered by a couple of soldiers. They were brought to McClellan, and McClellan knew what Lee was doing, at least initially in his mind. He knew what Lee was doing. And so he moved uncharacteristically aggressively to counter Lee's invasion, attacking Lee's troops that were guarding the passes through South Mountain in Maryland, and driving them back, although not as aggressively as he should have. It was one of those rare, complete battlefield victories, but it was hardly a full-blown battle because only a small portion of the Confederate Army was on the field. In fact, the army was badly spread out. McClellan pushed his way into the pass, but his soldiers under General Franklin didn't move quickly enough to relieve the Union garrison at Harper's Ferry, and McClellan paused after the victory at South Mountain and sort of pursued Lee half-heartedly toward Antietam Creek, where Lee set up a consolidated defensive position where he concentrated what forces he may. McClellan delayed longer, which allowed the majority of the Confederate Army to regroup after being shattered in the passes of South Mountain. And that's what led to the Battle of Antietam. But the Battle of South Mountain, perhaps McClellan's finest military achievement on the field of battle, one of the rare times where Robert E. Lee was caught off guard. Again, when you get the enemy's battle plans, it's easier to figure things out, right? But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump in today. So there are two battles in South Mountain, Turner's Gap and Crampton's Gap. Turner's Gap is the sort of main fight in the north between Hooker's and Reno's corps of the Army of the Potomac. They're fighting against D.H. Hill, which is trying to buy time for General Longstreet's corps to come up. Essentially, this is the main action, which is sort of barring the Union Army's way toward the northern half of the Confederate Army. The Battle of Crampton's Gap is looking at the battle in the south, at Crampton's Gap, where General Franklin is moving against Parnham and Semmes, who are both blocking the way toward General Jackson, who is at Harper's Ferry. So essentially, the attack in the south by Franklin would be an effort to relieve 12,000 Federal troops that were cut off in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, I guess now Western Virginia, while the attack in the north with Hooker and Reno was aimed at General Longstreet's corps. Again, Lee's army was divided, and these two gaps on either side of South Mountain were critical. If, for example, if McClellan could drive quickly in the south, he could potentially liberate the 12,000 troops in Harper's Ferry and also isolate Jackson from Longstreet. If he attacked in the north decisively, he could potentially defeat Longstreet before Jackson had a chance to come up. In the northern example, the Confederates bought enough time for Longstreet's men to come south and for the army as a whole to consolidate in and around the Antietam Creek just to the west. In the south, it was kind of a half-hearted affair, taking the gap, not really pressing hard enough, and as a result, the garrison at Harper's Ferry still fell. So it was a victory. The Union took both gaps, but it was not exploited to the max, largely because of insufficient vigor by Franklin in the south. He had a chance and blew it. He was not aggressive enough. McClellan did not encourage him to move quickly enough, but Franklin was also not a very aggressive commander. And in the north, a little bit more success, but again, it took too long to get the forces into play. Nightfall came before anything decisive could occur, and the Confederates were able to fall back in relatively good order and regroup on the Antietam Creek, where once again McClellan would dally before launching the inevitable attack 3 days later on the Battle of Antietam. With that being said, let's go ahead and fight. Which one are we? Maybe we'll fight both of them tonight. The whole Battle of Crampton's Gap is only an hour and a half, and it's the 6th Corps trying to force the pass. You also could do a 1-hour speculative Franklin's drive on Harper's Ferry, so I assume that is a speculative follow-up. If Franklin were to be successful at Crampton's Gap, then the following day, on September 15th, Franklin could drive on McLaws' division to try and liberate Harper's Ferry. The Battle of Burkittsville takes place, that's, I guess, the Battle of Crampton's Gap and Burkittsville are the same thing. The Battle of Turner's Gap is a little bit larger affair. It takes a little bit longer. It is called Antietam Prelude, the Battle of South Mountain. It is 3 hours long. There is also a speculative option where I think the Confederates have more troops. It looks like Longstreet comes up, or actually D.R. Jones comes up with more troops. So it looks like that's a bigger fight for the Battle of South Mountain. It starts about 50 minutes earlier. It's about a half an hour longer from a battle perspective. But we're going to fight the historical Battle of South Mountain. Now, I will say that the opening gap actually takes place a little bit further east. That's the battle for Fox's Gap, which occurs earlier in the morning. So this battle takes place at 8:30. Again, Reno's men go in against Hill. They take one of the initial objectives, but you only have 45 minutes, and then there's a long pause until the afternoon, until around 2 o'clock, when the Federals launch their final attack against Rhodes and Hill in and around Crampton's Gap for the actual Battle of South Mountain. But we're going to fight that longer action. We're going to fight the 3-hour historical action of the Battle of South Mountain, starting in the afternoon at 2:40 p.m., September 14th, 1862, the struggle for Fox's Gap and Turner Gap, and we'll see how we can play this out. The South Mountain is one of my favorite battles to represent in video games. I enjoy the Scourge of War version of it as well. For whatever reason, it's just a really kind of an interesting little fight. A smaller number of forces, I think, than you usually see in these kind of battles. I think the Union historically had around 20,000 men or so. The Confederates had less than about half of that. I think. These are just rough things I'm pulling out of my brain. But it's an interesting little fight. So we'll go ahead and fight the Battle of South Mountain. 3 hours long, not 3 real hours. We'll play as the Union.
There'll be some more infantry.
We start with 19 regiments, 7,792 men, more men en route, 5 batteries of artillery. So let's go ahead and pause the game real quick. Let's zoom out and let's take a look at where we're at right now. So Fox's Gap up here, we'd like to go ahead and push forward and take Fox's Gap. We then have the National Pike, which we want to take, the Wood Road. Turner Gap is the key objective out there to the north. We've got the Frosttown Gap here a little bit to the east. So the Frosttown Gap and the Turner Gap are the 2 most important positions on the battlefield, worth 8 and 5 victory points respectively. Ziddletown Gap is 3 victory points. The National Pike is 2. The Wood Road is 4, and the Fox's Gap is 4. So that's the situation there. We start with about 8,000 men. You can see they're mostly deployed off here to the south. They're Nagel, and then if we go a little bit further west, we've got troops under Reno. So Hooker's Corps is not up yet, and this is what we're facing against. Let's see what we have. Doesn't tell us what the Confederates have. Fox's Gap is currently not possessed by the Confederates, so the other objectives are. And the terrain is going to be tricky here because it's very high elevation fight with a lot of sort of steep ravines and stone walls and whatnot. This is actually where the Iron Brigade would get its nickname as they sort of moved forward under fire. General McClellan exclaimed to Hooker, the Corps commander, what men were those? And he was reported to, or Hooker's reported to have said that they were Gibbon's brigade of Western men, and McClellan said they must be made of iron. So that's kind of where the Iron Brigade nickname came from. With that being said, let's go ahead and take, is it Christ's brigade? Looks like these guys are in line formation. Let's move them forward here to the actual gap there, Fox's Gap. Move the map. Yeah. And then we've got the 11th Ohio is on the Ridge Road under Cook. These guys are also under Crook. Let's move them forward, calm, move them into skirmish line here. Hopefully the Confederates don't go after the Ridge Road, but we'll keep Crook's troops in position there just in case. Meanwhile, it looks like the 28th Ohio is also of his brigade, so go ahead and move them in here. So Wilcox is the division commander. Crook will have 3 regiments that'll kind of defend the Ridge Road. And then Christ will move forward to Fox's Gap. Welsh will also move forward to Fox's Gap and Road Column. Reno, the corps commander, will move forward. I believe Reno was killed in this battle, unless I'm mistaken. And then for the artillery, I don't really want to have... It's hard here because you've got really shitty terrain for artillery. I guess we'll go ahead and move them up to Fox's Gap. Hopefully they can see something up that way. I hope they use the roads, though. I don't really want them to be trying to go up those steep cliffs and ravines. Bad idea. I should probably turn game scrolling off. 1 second. Let's see. No tactical tips, blah, blah, blah. Map scrolling disabled. Wait, I've got dual screen and this game doesn't work well with scrolling. Let's zoom back out. So that artillery actually probably will be more useful moving toward the National Pike. So we'll kind of try and move them forward toward this crossroad. Got Reno moving forward on the left. Nagel's going to move forward up here in the center. We'll move Farrow's brigade up as well. So those of you who are unfamiliar, the 9th Corps is also the corps that attacks Burnside's Bridge on the Battle of Antietam, at the Battle of Antietam. All right, so we'll go ahead and start the battle now. We've got our troops in motion. We'll see where the fighting begins first. I assume there will be some fighting in and around Fox's Gap, while our other troops march forward on the National Pike. There you go. The Confederates do have troops. Fox's Gap. At least they're moving troops in. There's a regiment of Confederates there. There's a regiment up here on the National or Pike. All right. 28th Massachusetts engaged. We'll bring these additional troops up and hopefully push them out of the way. There do appear to be some Confederate... I don't know if there's any enemy soldiers over this way or if it's just an officer. All right, so we've got multiple regiments here engaging. Why do these troops they're not doing any damage back there? Alright, we'll move these skirmishers forward. Welsh doesn't appear to see any enemy troops over that way. Did I hit the wrong button again? Ah! God damn it. Alright, there we go. Alright, so Welsh doesn't appear to see any enemy troops, so we're going to go ahead and move him forward. Maneuver his troops through this rough terrain, and we're going to move in on the wood road. Meanwhile, Chris' brigade has a strong position against this one Confederate regiment of troops. You can see here, they were putting in over 100 damage on them. So they're going to push these rebels back, hitting them from front and flank, and we've just captured Fox's Gap. So the 28th Ohio will continue moving forward.
Sir, reinforcements are coming
Meanwhile,
up.
some additional reinforcements are coming up. Troops down here in the south are not yet in position.
Maneuver call online.
Yet. Appear to be some Rebs over here. Welsh, don't get yourself shot.
Maneuver column. Brigade, field left. Battle line.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move Christ forward. We're going to move Welsh into position as well. And in the south, we've got Nagel coming up, so we're going to move him into position. We'll move him in double line just in case there's any enemy troops in these woods here that might threaten his flank. We'll move Pharaoh up in support.
Maneuver column. Double line.
Does artillery have... Where are those reinforcements coming up, by the way? All right, so we've got additional reinforcements under Rodman's division coming up. We're going to make the main push here in the center through the pass. So Fairchild's going to move up that way. We should be able to win this thing pretty easily, I would think. We don't fuck it up. I guess we'll leave the 28th Ohio back here. And they're just going to hold Fox's Gap. So we've got Cook holding the Ridge Road. We've got some additional troops up here. We've got some troops that'll come up in the north, too. But Rodman's troops are moving forward. Pharaoh and Nagel will start advancing their troops toward the National Pike. Meanwhile, Christ is gonna advance his troops on the Wood Road. Welsh is gonna support him.
Sir, reinforcements are coming up.
All right, so they're gonna take their time. How are we doing time-wise? I know this is a shortish scenario. It's 3 hours long. We're about a half an hour or 20 minutes in. We've still got quite a bit of time. Almost over 2.5 hours. Wilcox forward, commander. Reno, the corps commander, forward. I think Reno was killed in this battle, wasn't he? But anyway, so we've got those troops moving forward. We've got additional reinforcements coming up. You can see here more and more federal troops pouring in to the battlefield.
Maneuver column.
Seymour's troops. Let's actually move Seymour, his troops up here. I want to have them try and take the northern pass. We're going to move Meade's division up north, I think.
Maneuver column. Brigade, field left. Form the road.
I don't know if road column tells them to march on the roads or not. Be great if it did.
Form the road column.
Alright, so Meade, your division's arriving. You're going to go up there. So Hooker's troops are starting to come up. Meade's division is from Hooker's corps. Meanwhile, Nagel's going to advance and double. Bear's going to move up behind him, stacked. They're going to move in line formation, so they're going to move slowly. That's fine for now. Pretty much Reno's whole corps is in action now, I think. You can see here these troops are advancing, hopefully overlapping the flank of any rebels that might be defending the Wood Road. As Welsh sort of moves downhill, he certainly could overlap the flank of this rebel regiment we see here. I'm actually going to spread these guys out into battle line.
Maneuver column.
Going to try and move these guys in maneuver column until we see some Rebs.
Maneuver column.
Could use some cavalry here to... Oh, shit. Who are they shooting at? And tell me who they're getting shot. Who's getting shot at? Well, the 100th Pennsylvania is going right behind the Rebs. Alright, so Nagel is engaged. Meanwhile, Christ has taken the Wood Road. Move his brigade forward. Doesn't look like the Rebs have any troops over there. So again, making progress, outflanking the Rebs. 48th Pennsylvania is going to come forward. Meanwhile, we've got 3 regiments firing on 1 rebel. Now the Rebs are entrenched. Meanwhile, over here we've got 3 regiments firing on a lone rebel regiment as well. going to try and drop the 46th New York in and behind these rebs.
Sir, reinforcements are coming up. Reporting, General.
Nice. So we got these guys to surrender. Go ahead and slow the game down here for a second. We've got some things going on. All right, so we forced one rebel regiment to surrender. Welsh's brigade did a great job there. See if we can drop Welsh in behind these rebs in front of the National Pike. Meanwhile, Christ is going to continue advancing through the woods. Barrow's going to advance to the north. Get over toward that other gap. Meade's arrived, but his troops are still slogging north. It does look like when I choose road column, though, that they follow the roads. At least that's good. Meanwhile, Rodman's troops are moving slow, so I guess we'll do that. Getting a whole bunch of reinforcements arriving. Another division at least. Keep hitting the wrong button. Trying to hit the zoom out button, but it's right by the map scroll button. It's a little bit frustrating. So that's good to know. So if you choose the road option, other than the fact that it's a column formation, you're pretty much never going to want your troops to be in. It does appear to cause them to stick to the roads. I don't think the maneuver column does that. So Hooker, the Corps commander, the 1st Corps is up. You can see Doubleday's Iron Brigade has arrived. Or sorry, not Doubleday. Gibbon's Iron Brigade. Doubleday's brigade has arrived. Dak, man, yes, this was fought before the Battle of Antietam. This was 3 days before. They were fighting in and around the mountain in Maryland, known as South Mountain, which had a couple of key passes that essentially Robert E. Lee's army was split. Longstreet was to the north. Jackson was to the south, trying to besiege 12,000 Yankee troops at Harper's Ferry. So Lee's army was split, and essentially at the time, McClellan came upon General Lee's orders that basically told him where all the elements of the Army of Northern Virginia were, and he found out essentially that the Confederate Army was broken up, and he decided to attack them. Elements of Longstreet's corps were defending the passes through to the South Mountain, essentially to protect the vulnerable rear and keep Longstreet and Jackson's lines of communication open. Essentially, defending these passes or defending these pikes was critical to prevent Lee's army from being cut in two. So McClellan acted reasonably quickly and did manage to drive the Confederates out of the passes, but it wasn't fast enough to achieve any sort of decisive result. The Confederates were somewhat thrashed, but it wasn't, again, it wasn't decisive in any sort of meaningful way. And now that I say road column makes them follow roads, it doesn't appear to be the case anymore, as they're marching right through the woods. So that's awesome. So I guess in that case, you might as well just go straight for Crosstown Gap, and I probably just pulled the division out of the line of battle for the better part of the day, as they kind of have to march over there. Hartman's brigade's coming up. The Union badly outnumbered the Confederates in this battle, for what it's worth. Again, because a small portion of Lee's army was cut off here, or was being attacked. Not cut off, but they were attempting to cut them off. Alright, so we'll move back to normal speed. You can see here we've got the 8th Michigan in behind Colquitt's troops.
Reporting, General.
46th New York.
Reporting, General.
So more and more Confederates are being spotted over here. They've got troops in Frosttown Gap. Looks like at least a brigade is over there. Meanwhile, I'm trying to cause these two rebel regiments over here to surrender. Looks like we caused one of them to surrender. Routed the other. All right, so we caused 2 more rebel regiments to surrender. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut this video off here. We're off to a good start at the Battle of South Mountain up near Turner's Gap, the main action of South Mountain. So far, things are going well, but we'll finish this battle off in the next video. I hope you guys are enjoying this video and this series, as always. And until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.